Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Titanforge Podcast. My name is Dratnos. Joining us this week is special guest Squishei of Wowhead.
Hello. Glad to be on here.
I turned one direction, then I realized that it was the other one on the video that we got here. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I work for Wowhead. I mostly handle the dungeon and raid guides and anything related to that section for the website, and also post news and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, you were the person responsible for getting our Titanforge Podcast article a month ago, if anybody remembers that one, helping facilitate getting that on the site, which was pretty awesome.
It was a lot of fun working with you guys, so I'm glad to be on here.
And then, of course, joining us this week is Tettles.
Hello, I'm feeling a lot better. No longer sick.
Awesome, glad to hear.
It's always nice to be back. Hell yeah!
And coming off of a pretty solid MDI performance, we have Trell. Well, I'm 3 for 3 on going the wrong direction at the start here.
I'm not over there. Hello.
Yeah, welcome back. So, Trell, why don't you tell us about your MDI situation? Because now we've got one cup left, and you're jockeying for these BlizzCon seedings. What's the situation like for you over in the MDI?
Well, we almost got third this last weekend, and that would have pretty much sealed the deal for going to BlizzCon, and we would have been super happy because that's what we were going for. As we practiced the whole bracket we planned out from Thursday to Sunday was practicing for that specific lineup of matches. We're happy we got those matches, but we didn't quite get third. And so we have one more chance on this next weekend, which is Cup 3. Not this weekend, but the next after the show comes out.
So you're, yeah.
And if we get third place there, we have a good chance. However, it's still not guaranteed. It depends on what the fourth place team, which is 40K, how they do with the Cup. So depending on our two teams, how we do, we could land in fourth or fifth, either way.
And you need fourth to get to BlizzCon? Yeah, okay. Well, do you think that next week we're going to see, I guess this is kind of spoiling a little bit of a future topic, but do you think that there's going to be full participation from all these top teams next week or next cup, or?
There's been lots of rumors going around and players saying they're not going to play in the cup or they're not going to practice very much. I don't think they're going to back out at all. I think every team's going to be there in the third cup. Maybe some of them don't practice because they know they're already going to BlizzCon. We'll see. I think they're bluffing.
Okay. And you guys are planning to go pretty hard to try and make this dream come true, right?
Yeah, I think I actually convinced my team to stop raiding for a week. Finally.
Wait.
Wow.
Nice.
Wait, Sist is posting out well, I guess Vodka is killed
because they killed
Azshara.
it. He gets a
yeah. So he's posting out. Wait a second.
Also,
wait. So are you going to be a classic streamer now, Trell?
No, I'm just playing classic casually. I'm a level 17 hunter as of Wednesday. And people are like level 40 by now.
Squishei, how about you? You've been playing classic?
About 30 minutes today. I'm like level 6, so pretty far along.
Tettles, are you a classic gamer?
No, it's too hard for me. My brain is really small. Dude, I killed 35 of these little shaman in this cave, and I swear I died like over 10 times, and I spent like multiple hours trying to do this one quest, and I'm thoroughly frustrated with classic. I'm not very good.
I had to have killed at least 100 centaur to get 15 bracers in the barons.
Now, Tettles, is it true that you were trying to play Moonkin in classic?
Oh, I'm still trying.
Okay. Good luck with that. I have not been playing classic. I've been raiding up until yesterday at the time of recording this, a couple days ago by the time it comes out, when we finally got Queen Azshara over in Poetry Club, US 20th. But even with her dead, I don't expect I'll be playing much classic, if any. It's,
I saw a part of the stream last night. Things were getting a little heated there.
Oh yeah, there have been some nice clips this tier actually of the malding, as we call it.
They call it the malding for Jason getting upset. Really?
Yeah.
No, man.
Poor Jason.
It's good. I'll send you some clips.
Yikes, dude! We actually watch Poetry Club's raid like as a guild sometimes. We'll sit there and we'll watch you guys. We'll be like, their words are fucked. They're gonna wipe. It's like, oh, they wiped.
It's not just Poetry Club.
Well, yeah, we've done that for a couple of guilds at this point. We're just like sit there, just like, oh yeah, well they're probably not going to make it out of this one.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is really nice is once you kill a boss, if there's another guild that you haven't that hasn't killed it yet, watching them progress. Unfortunately for us, all the guilds we care about have already killed it, so we don't get to do that this tier. But hopefully next year we can get it a little faster. Tettles, I've also seen you playing some live keys as a balance druid, some pretty high ones too. How's that been going?
I actually think balance with the 2 minor slots actually does way better damage than I originally thought. Probably also helps that Outlaw Rogue got some pretty substantial nerfs along the way. Makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, easier to justify bringing some more non-outlaws.
Yeah, well, it's also balance is kind of comp dependent. Like you have to play with like a Demon Hunter, an Outlaw Rogue, or like double Outlaw. But it's way better than I thought. It's kind of weird.
It's kind of like Season 1 was, where Demon Hunter, Rogue, Boomkin is very strong. I think it is really good for life.
Yeah, I think you could play Assassination as well in that comp, maybe.
Yeah, I'm also unkillable. I have 14% versatility and 7% avoidance.
Yeah,
and 2 resounding protections, so we're literally just not killable.
Moon can also just extremely tanky against physical, right? Like,
yeah, it's like 25% additional armor,
which is some damage in keys.
I do recall you dying twice to the same boss in Freehold.
Well, that wasn't due to anything other than me playing bad. No, he threw his whirling saber at me, and I'm standing over there trying to line. And I'm like in the corner, and I get hit by the whirling saber and knocked into the grape shot and died. This is two of this dungeon in a row.
At least you didn't reset the boss. Feels bad, man.
Dude, that boss, I've been tanking some keys, and I reset that boss once by standing on a tiny rock in the middle of the room. That is not pleasant. Great? Yeah, that's so silly.
Make sure you don't blink in the wrong spot. You might reset the boss. Like it's so bad for tanks.
Wait, if you transcend it to the wrong spot, you just like instantly reset them too?
Oh yeah. I mean, like blink your eyelashes, like just literally anything could reset the boss. But yeah, I mean that would do it.
Yeah, if you just go to like a slightly different elevation than the bosses, though, they're gone. They're resetting. It's so annoying. All right, let's move on to talking about some of the main topics of this show. But first, let's quickly shout out our Twitter at Titanforge Wow. That's where you can ask us questions every week. We'll tweet what our topic's going to be and if we have special guests before we record, and you can ask us questions there. Another great place to ask us questions and hang out with us in general is our Discord channel. Wherever you're watching this, there should be a link to our Discord channel below there. You can come hang out. And if you're interested in accessing some special channels in that Discord and supporting the show, we now have a Patreon page as well, patreon.com/Titanforge, where you can help support the show, make us able to do this every week. And one of the tiers of that support will cause you to get your name shouted out every single week on the show. We currently have 3 people at that tier or higher. They are Paul, Gu, and Tettles Jr., aka Never Nude. That you can pick whatever name you like to get shouted out there. So fire away whatever memes you enjoy. So thanks so much for supporting the show, everybody who is on our Patreon so far. All right, let's talk about what our main topics are going to be. So this week we're going to talk about the MDI, the rules, and the participation changes that we're seeing. Kind of the drop off. We saw this in Cup 1, but we'll talk about it now that it's happening in Cup 2 or in Season 2 as well. Over in the East Cups and also a little bit in the West Cup. We're going to talk about what makes live keys hard. So what the difficulty factors are. If you wonder like why teams can't just do any level key, we'll talk about why that is. And then we're also going to talk about, and this is going to be the first thing we're going to talk about, our overall thoughts on Azshara's Eternal Palace now that some of actually nobody here is progressing that raid anymore, right? Is anybody here on progression in Azshara's Eternal Palace?
I think we're all finished with the progression.
Yeah, we're all either didn't dart or just finished progression.
Didn't start. Dude.
Well,
hey, we could just say finish. Don't flame Trell like that.
Actually, to be fair, I have done some Mythic Eternal Palace progression with Trell in Twitch Prime.
That's true.
Yeah, famous guild of Area 52. Yeah. Do you know last week I did that raid as Subtlety Trell? I don't know if anybody noticed. Yeah. I did a subtlety key last week too. It was fun.
Oh man,
we depleted.
So wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
Which we depleted. Wait.
I don't want to talk about it.
My team tried subtlety in some time trials, and we depleted those too.
Unfortunate. Yeah. Problem with subtlety is like there's just no room for error on that spec. Like you have to do everything perfectly to do just anything half as good as any of the other specs. And if you make any big mistake,
so
it's
dependent
over.
on the situations too. Like you have to have everything standing still pretty much. It's not like Outlaw, which can adapt to any situation. On paper, Sub is good and even Sim's better in 5 targets, I think, than Outlaw. But in reality, Outlaw does a ton more damage and keys.
Yeah, and like if mobs are moving such that you can't use your global for just like half a second as subtlety, you're doing no damage if that's in your cooldowns. Like you need to hit every single one of your globals in your cooldowns, or else you're doing 0 damage. But that's not the main topic that we're talking about here. The main topic is our overall thoughts on Azshara's Eternal Palace. And let's start off from the beginning. We have the first 3 bosses of the raid, which are kind of the intro difficulty ones. Actually, starting with Abyssal Commander Savara, which I think I'm pretty pleased with Abyssal Commander Savara as a first boss. I think it was hard, like a good difficulty for a first boss. I don't know if you guys like this being less of a pushover than we've been used to.
I have actually killed that one, so I really enjoyed it. I think it was a lot harder than the previous raid's first boss, and that was a good sign for me.
How about you, Squishei? Do you have thoughts on these first couple bosses in terms of relative difficulty?
The first boss was very surprising as to its difficulty. I know many guilds wiped either to the Enrage because it has a hard 630, or not really hard, but you wipe pretty quickly after 630, or trying to 6 or 7 heal it because of the insane healing requirement week 1, and that's like almost a little too far on the tuning knob, for my opinion, for a first boss compared to like Champion, which was too easy.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the nice things about it though is that like it nerfs itself pretty well, so that like, okay, if most, like any guild that was going to progress, you know, through the later bosses was going to be able to kill it day 1, and any of the guilds that couldn't kill it day 1 were going to be pretty quickly able to kill it with neck levels and stuff. So to the point where it's like now it's pretty puggable, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think maybe you're right though. Maybe they're like the first boss being a wall for some guilds isn't a good thing.
Well, I mean,
if
you're walking in there at like 415 to 420 item level, the first boss probably should be a little bit more challenging. But I feel like an equality guild should have actually been able to kill that boss with like less than 5 pulls.
For us, I think it was a nice challenge. I think it was a nice difficulty. If you didn't do it right, you kind of died. If you did it right, you kind of just scraped through.
Well, okay, so alternatively too, Queen Azshara on Heroic week 1 was also pretty challenging for what it's worth. So basically, if you hadn't killed a Queen Azshara Heroic, you probably weren't going to kill Savara on Mythic. Like,
yeah, they were tough in slightly different ways, right? Like the number, like if you did Azshara perfectly executed, if you executed Azshara well, it was pretty easy, right? It was just that there was a lot to execute, whereas Savara was kind of just the numbers were pretty high, and there was stuff to dodge, but it wasn't like complicated mechanics. All right, then we had Blackwater Behemoth and Radiance of Azshara, which were, on the whole, a little easier, I'd say, than Savara. Went down pretty quick. I'm glad that they made Blackwater Behemoth not too hard, because that boss was... it had the potential to be pretty annoying. I could imagine, like, if you were spending days progressing in that underwater environment, that could get pretty lame. But the fact that you were in and out in an hour was pretty nice.
Yeah, it's also annoying because the shot is really, really buggy if you're too high up in the air, where like somebody will like randomly get one shot. You're like, what? How did I just die?
Yeah,
it is. I'm glad it was an easy boss just for that reason too.
It's kind of tough to. It's tough to imagine being the Blizzard designers, right? And you're just there, and you're like, okay, what's this game engine we have? What's one of the weaknesses? Well, the Z-axis just doesn't work at all, right? And you're like, okay, I need to come up with an idea for a boss. How about one that has a very finicky Z-axis, requirement?
They have to soak something.
Yeah, soak something. But like if you're more than 10 feet off the ground, the soak just goes across the ground anyways. I think how it works, and it doesn't go in the line in the midair.
Dude, or if you have a pet or you use condensed life force, if you're too high up in the air, it will literally just like despawn it instantly and does no damage. You're just like, what just happened, man?
Yeah,
like condensed life force isn't hitting anything.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit of a thinker on what happened there. I'm not sure. And then Radiance of Azshara, complete pushover of a boss, same as Heroic, just with an extra side. So a little bit of healing and dispelling going on, but nothing going on until we get to Lady Ashvane. And Lady Ashvane, I think, was a good difficulty for a 4th boss in a raid. I think that it was nice. Like, it held pretty much every guild for a little while. And for some guilds, it held them for a while. But like, if you were a guild that was held on Lady Ashvane for a while, you probably had a good progression experience through Savara, Blackwater, and Radiance. So that was probably fine. And like afterwards, now that we're in this neck level 65 world, most guilds can now 2-phase it, and that's making it, less of a pain on farmer and stuff.
I have heard though that there were a decent amount of guilds that actually got hard walled on this fight before you could actually hit this like 65 2-phase stuff that we've seen a lot of people doing, where there are some guilds that actually have like 250 pulls on Ashvane.
Yeah.
And it's like,
The
I
DPS
think it's
check-
maybe a little too hard. I'm sorry, go ahead, Squish.
It's okay. The DPS check was pretty brutal the first week, and then it slowly goes down, but not enough to where like you can 2-phase it, I think, for those lesser guilds. So you're kind of in this weird like state of you kind of need 65 to push over a threshold, or you need to wait a few more weeks, and I think it could have just been, like Charles said, nerfed just a tiny little bit in terms of health to just make those pushes just a tad bit easier.
the strategy on that fight is actually pretty rough too. Just requiring 3 tanks, and that third tank's job is actually pretty complicated in terms of like who is soaking the water logs whenever you're doing it for like a 3-phase strategy. It's not hard for like good guilds, but I could see it being hard for pretty worse guilds that can't 2-phase.
Guilds that pretty safely got through like Opulence, Conclave, and Rastakhan into Zarlor, I could see still having a lot of trouble on Ashvane, right?
I mean, is it harder than Opulence, you think?
It's harder in a different way, right? Like there's this kind of like harsher numerical challenge that Opulence like didn't really have, right?
Yeah, I think it's different.
Ashvane, like you're pretty like you basically your kill pull has to go pretty perfectly and has to have people doing pretty good damage if you're close on the numbers. Will it get nerfed any further from here? Do you guys think? Is anybody expecting to see like a package of nerfs in the next month or so?
I don't know, seeing at least one more though.
What do you think, Squishy?
I think they will. But the thing is, this fight, because the shield size is based on her health pool, if you touch her health pool by just a tiny little bit, that nerfs every aspect of the fight. The bubble phase will last shorter, you'll get less bubbles, and she just has less health that you need to burn through. So I think maybe like 5% off her health, and that's it. And I think that'll fix the fight for most guilds.
Yes,
I think that fixes it for everybody pretty much.
5% would definitely be a pretty big thing. That would make it.
Well, we're in a weird spot. We're in a weird spot too, where there are some people who are actually playing the game a decent amount have 65, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, I would expect people who are progressing on Lady Ashvane are not taking the game as seriously as probably all of us. And
those guilds probably have like 5 people that are neck level 65 at this point, but 15 people who are like 62 or something.
How many people did you guys have at 65 whenever you killed Queen Azshara, Dratnus?
When we killed Azshara? Yeah. Hang on, I have a spreadsheet. Let me check.
We had 17. Like,
when did you kill it?
Sunday.
Okay, yeah. We killed it yesterday, and we had.
So before the reset.
Yeah, 15. Of which 2 of them were new this reset. Yeah.
So exactly, but so people who are taking the raid pretty seriously are already 65. But if you're still on Ashvane, you're probably a little bit more casual of a guild. Like your guys, like 1 day a raid guild, like 1 day a week raid guild. How many people do you guys have at 65? Like what the hell?
Probably 4 or 5 in Twitch Prime.
Our 1 hour a week mythic raiding guild is currently progressing on our 6th poll on Ashvane next week. So
next week, yeah. Casual. It's not this week, right? Because there's a classic or whatever that everybody's doing.
Yeah, we didn't raid this week because we're playing classic. Very casual.
We did have one raider not show up to raid because he was playing classic.
Is that why Jason was so like mad?
It certainly put a bad note on the start of our progression. That was on Monday that happened.
Yeah, dude, that's rough.
Yeah, it was certainly unexpected. I think it was Anyways, Ashvane nerfs. I think Ashvane and Azshara are the 2 most likely bosses to get hit by something like a 5% nerf in the next month. Other than that, I wouldn't expect many of the other bosses to see changes, except for maybe Zakul. Zakul is a boss where I could see something other than a % health change coming in.
Zakul would be like Delirium damage nerf, probably.
I think there are also like some of the push timings with Zakul they could interact with. So Zakul is... Yeah. And we're skipping ahead a little bit, but we'll come back to Orgzo and Queen's Corp. Let's talk a little bit about Zakul. Because Zakul is this boss where... My biggest complaint with it is that, like, coming out of phase 1, there's about a 5-second window where you want to push the boss into phase 2. If you push too late, you get a Manifest Nightmares cast with your first Manic Dread, and that's really annoying. And if you push too early, you get a second set of Summoners. Or sorry, if you push too late, you get the Summoners. If you push too early, you get that overlap.
Okay.
And
So
so
you have to sit there and hold DPS.
yeah,
for a long
you're sitting
time,
there.
right?
At this point, we're holding DPS for 20, 25 seconds, something like that. The last time we killed Zakul, and that's not. I think that's a pretty annoying part of fight design. So I hope that going forward they design fights where like every time you push phase, it just completely resets all the cast timers or whatever, and it doesn't
I agree.
rely on previous information.
the issue with it is that they're on global timers, right?
Yeah.
It's the reason that it always ends up happening. Like I feel like stopping DPS is such just like a lame thing to have to do, and it's happened so frequently lately. Like it happened on Gahoon, it happened on Jaina, it's happening on Zakul. Like you just have to end up like sitting there waiting because you can't have a really bad overlap.
It happens on Azshara as well. On our Azshara progression, we were stopping DPS in phase 1, phase 2,
Yep.
not phase 3 or 4, but you know. In phase 3, we would stop DPS on a Myrmidon, but that's different because there was another target to be DPSing at the same time. But in both phases 1 and 2, there's these moments where you stop DPS and there's nothing to DPS for a couple seconds.
Yeah.
At least there, it's only 5 seconds and not 25 like it is on Zakul.
Again, it's just global fight timers. Well, at least on Queen Azshara, it's because you have to go soak the orbs, and like once you start pushing faster, you'll miss that overlap. So it is beatable, right?
Well, you need to push way faster because you need to beat the cutter cast that's before then because the cutter goes away at a fixed time,
true.
and if the cutter is still there in the intermission, that's bad news.
That is a good point.
The phase 2 push you could maybe make faster because you basically the Azshara pushes in this weird way where she pushes like 7 seconds after she reaches her health breakpoint. So you need to push her 7 seconds or more before the abilities you're trying to skip. Otherwise, you're still going to get the abilities and you're going to get the intermission at the same time.
The thing is, if you push faster, then you have this issue with ward soaks not being up at the right time, and then you're losing ward soaks throughout the fight. So it's just like, where do we go from here? Because while some abilities aren't on the global timer, your debuff for soaking the wards is.
Yeah.
So then your wards are going to start falling.
But she does also drain them based on time as well, right? Like the faster you push, the less she'll drain the wards. So I think those roughly even out. You'll just have to have different people soak at different times. Like you have to you'll change the timings, but I think you still have the right like amount of soaks to do to kill the fight. But yeah, it's weird, and it's a byproduct of just these. I don't know. I mean, I actually don't mind that on a last boss fight like Azshara. If there's like, I don't mind the Azshara stop damage stuff as much. I don't mind that level of finesse there. But Zakul,
the Zakul one is way worse than the Azshara one.
I take a big issue with just like AFK for 15 seconds in phase 1 of a
because the
boss.
Azshara one you're actually doing something is the difference. Where these other ones you're stopping because you don't want a bad overlap later on. You're just like, this is dumb.
On Zakul, I go Raptor form. I go into my Ghost Wolf form. Then I run to the middle of the room and I drop my totems in the middle of the room so that they'll cover the whole room later. And then I'll run back and be in Raptor form and just chill.
Dropping the totem mastery, yes.
Yeah. That's all I can do to keep it from being too boring. Sometimes I'll turn on my auto run and just do a circuit around the room. That's a fun thing to do as well.
Another Wrath of Azshara achievement.
No, yeah, that's the Radiance of Azshara achievement.
Oh yeah,
for doing 6 laps around Radiance. That's a fun one to do. I encourage everybody to do that. By the way, fun run. Look it up. The achievement. It's good.
Have you guys seen that clip of the guy playing Minesweeper in phase 1 of Zakul?
I have not. No, that's awesome.
There's a clip of a guy phase 1 of Zakul just playing Minesweeper the entire time, and they missed the push. They pushed too early, and their guild leader's just like, or the raid leader's just like, wipe it over, start again. And he's just playing Minesweeper the entire time. And
wait, they pushed too early?
They pushed too early, and I'm just sitting there thinking like, they needed more people to play Minesweeper during a poll, and they wouldn't play.
What a boss!
Yeah,
I'll go find that clip again.
I saw Warcraft logs of somebody's first like a timeline of their casts on Zakul, and it was a Moonkin log, and their casts for the first minute of the fight were flap, 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 flap. It was just only so flaps for the first minute. Every global was a flap.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Zakul is also a fight that has this interesting history. Since we're on this kind of reviewing the tier, a post-mortem, it had this one tanking strategy that existed for the first couple weeks on the fight. And then they fixed that, which was nice, and they came with a nerf as well, and that made it so 2 tanking was a good strategy. What do you guys think about these kind of fights where they end up being 1 tankable? Do you think that that's something that they should try to avoid, or do you think it's fine if there's just fights that are one tankable for a couple weeks and then they eventually give it the old 5% down, 2 tanks required treatment?
I think they never want a solo tank fight. I think they always try to design it for 2 tanks and prevent that, but sometimes they mess up and miss something that could make solo tanking viable. Like,
yeah. Squishei, how about you? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, so as someone that tanked that as the solo tank for a brief period of time, it was by far my favorite tank fight of the tier. And part of it was because it was a hot Shrub fight, and Shara would have loved it.
yeah, that's true. I did see that.
The ads take like bonus damage when they're first out, so you just Shrub everything and it just does max damage, but it was like really complex. You had to balance like ad pickup with, you know, dodging the tentacles and like all this other stuff and watching your health. And then when they nerfed it, they just make both tanks just take unmitigatable magic damage, which is boring and doesn't feel great. But
yeah, that is kind of lame.
It's like Charles said, they have this thing against single tanking fights most of the time, and they fix it. I mean, Gorm, you look at Gorm from Trial of Valor. I don't think they fixed Star Augur, but yeah.
Nah, they didn't fix Augur.
They
It's
never
weird.
did, huh?
It's so weird that they are so quick to fix solo tanking stuff, but they are not quick to fix like 2 healing fights. It's really strange. Like they're okay with you being able to 2 heal a fight, but they're not fine with you being able to.
Yeah, but fundamentally, the fights you can 2 heal are either the fights that you overgear or the fights where your healers are like method quality healers, right? Like, isn't that?
I feel like Queen Azshara was 2 healable by more guilds. There was just no real reason.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there haven't been that many guilds that have done it besides method, basically.
Well, it's because you don't. It's because the phase 4 burn is like way easier. The phase 4 burn and the indomitable burn are kind of trivial once you end up actually getting more gear and more neck level. So you'd rather have the Holy Paladin for Aura Mastery at the end of the day as opposed to just running double disc.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right that these, like, I don't know, the thing about the 2 healer fights is that it's really hard, right? Like,
yeah.
How do you make things not 2 healable? Do you introduce more dispels? That fight already had 3 dispels, but you just had Warlock imps doing it. You know, do you
Sure,
you take this a cool approach and you require it. You make it require more healer cooldowns. That's the only healing that's required. Is just you pop a cooldown whenever the Manic Dread's coming in.
Yeah. I suppose that's a solution.
I don't know. Healing is ass this tier.
Well, yeah, the balance is not good, right? Disc and Holy Paladin being so much better than every other alternative as well.
Just how healing occurs this tier is pretty bad. So like, I guess we'll hit all of these really quickly. Orgazoa and Queen's Court. It's a pretty healing intensive fight, and it actually requires some general throughput and cooldown timings that are. I would say that these are probably one of the 2 cooler fights of the tier, just in general, just because like it feels like for everybody there's something that you can be doing. Orgazoa is a bit weird tank wise because it kind of gets trivialized by 3 tanking, but both Queen's Court and Orgazoa are both pretty cool in their own separate ways.
Yeah, Orgazoa, if you were 2 tanking, was really hard to tank. And it is one of these fights where the difficulty for the tanks was way higher than for the DPS, but that's kind of I don't know, tanking difficulty is weird. There's some fights that are just straightforward to tank and some fights that are hard to tank. Orgazoa with 2 tanks was really hard to tank compared to how hard it was to DPS.
Yeah, okay, so then Zakul and Queen Azshara from like a healer perspective, Zakul is I drop my barrier /link /healer cooldown at Manic Dread timings specifically, and then I'm just kind of AFK hitting the boss beyond that. There's no throughput that is actually required on that fight beyond just like dropping a cooldown. And it's the exact same for Queen Azshara. They're both like either you get almost like 1 hit to 100 from 100 to 0 with 0 way of being able to fix that issue, or you're 100% health like the whole entire time. And there's like, because like if Queen Azshara could be solo healed, technically, like the throughput is there from Resto Druid. Like Resto Druid could solo heal that fight, but then you just don't have enough DR from barrier, or you're missing it from War Mastery, right? So there's no chance in hell that you would ever solo heal that fight. In those 2 fights, like Queen Azshara, I think will probably go down in history as one of the worst healing fights of all time.
Maybe not just worst healing fights as well. It might be one of the worst just modern fights that they've made like since Cataclysm or whatever.
People hate that shit more than Kill Jaden. It's fucking obnoxious.
I liked Kill Jaden, and I like a lot of fights that people don't like. I liked Gahun. I liked Kill Jaden.
Gahun was just ass to farm. Gahun wasn't really bad.
Yeah, Gahun was. I agree. It was annoying to farm. It was a fight that did not become easier during farm, which is a good quality of a boss fight. I think is a fight that becomes easier during farm.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think progression on Gahun was really fun.
I don't know.
Outside of phase 1.
Queen Azshara is weird because Queen Azshara and Zakul are both like. Okay, so Zakul is reliant on people who go down into the Delirium realm to not die. And basically, if those 6 people don't die, the boss just instantly flops.
Mm-hmm.
Queen Azshara requires your whole entire raid to not die. And if somebody dies, then you're probably going to fuck up your wards. Like,
There's so many ways to wipe on Queen Azshara too. Oh, the charge spear missed the shield. Wipe it up. Oh, Warlock dispel screwed up. All right, hit the boss. Wipe it up. Like, there's just so many things. Oh, back end into the boss. Back into the beam.
back into the ward to reset my stacks.
Yeah, there's just so many ways, and then if you do that, it's just not recoverable because you retain your stacks through death. So like you take 8 stacks, you're dead.
Or you pull the Poetry Club special and you drop the tear on the console.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was rough. The baits.
You're like, who baited that? You're just like, oh no, dude.
Yeah. Azshara is a fight with a lot of points of failure, right? And a lot of them are kind of like, they don't feel particularly fun to wipe to. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's just like, it feels like BS and you got unlucky. Like, okay, there's, 15 people in the raid right now, of which 3 of them have their Warlock Gateway debuff, and if one of those 3 people gets targeted by Beacon, it's going to be a lot harder here.
Save grip.
Yeah, and you can cover it with grips. You can beat that, so that eventually that stopped being a problem. But during a lot of progression, that was. And then you have there's just like a bunch of mechanics that can target random people basically, and if they go on the right people, it's way easier than if it goes on the wrong people, and that is pretty unsatisfying, I think, to progress on. And it also means that just most of the time you pull the boss, you're not going to have interesting stuff to do, and then randomly you're going to have these butt clenching moments when you actually get targeted by all the abilities and you have to do stuff, and that's not even that fun. You're just really worried about wiping the raid, because if you make a big mistake there, or if you make one mistake, you wipe the raid. But then most pulls you don't actually get to do fun and interesting hard stuff either.
There's still this big RNG thing in phase 3, I believe, where depending on which way the beam goes, that dictates which ad you go to second and which ad to third. And if you go to the left ad first, second, that is a harder DPS check on the boss than if you go to the right ad second, because of when they put the last shield up. So it's like, if you go right, you get plenty of free boss damage. I think on early progression, it was 5% bonus boss damage going to the right first.
Mm-hmm.
Now it doesn't matter so much because DPS is so much higher, but that still exists. And as far as I know, and that's just why?
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I don't understand why Vena Scalestorm or whatever is differently coded than the other one on the other side. They should just have the same shield timings as each other. It's so messed up. I guess that did Blizzard envision us going to all 3 of them and DPSing all and being at all 3 at the same time somehow? Was that
no way, because you're not gonna get enough charged spears.
You got some extra Myrmidon. Maybe you're gripping them around, or a tank is bringing them to the different. I don't know, dude. I'm trying to understand what they were thinking with making the left and right ads different.
That's nonsensical. I'm glad that we all realize that that's fucking ridiculous. Yeah, dude, let me just grip him cross because this guy got broken already.
I don't understand. I'm actually just curious. What the thought process is, because you can't have multiple Myrmidons casting charge spears at the same time, or that wipes the raid either. It's bizarre to me. Yeah. The fact that you're just, and in the last phase, the beam, which side the beam goes on does matter. If it pushes you into the side where you're already baited, that's more annoying than if it pushes you to the open side. That's an interesting but that's fine, right? That's a different kind of thing.
It's a little less. It's not 5% boss damage. It's a mild inconvenience that you could work through if line up that way.
Yeah, and you might be able to look at a 1% wipe and be like, if we just got the better beam in the last phase, we would have killed it, and that may be true. But that, I don't know, that's the kind of RNG that I think we just expect to always be present in boss fights, and if that's absent, the fight becomes too rote.
So I guess we can move on from Eternal Palace. Something I do want to say
there's
before
one thing actually.
All right, what's up?
What is with Queen Azshara phase 1, and why does it exist?
And okay, this
delete
is
it.
It's not an Azshara phenomenon, right? 3 of the 4 end bosses this tier have had these lame Gahun and Jaina, right? Jaina had a phase 1 that it was not the same as both Gahun and Azshara had this phase 1 where you weren't even fighting Gahun or Azshara, you were fighting their minions that nobody cares about.
And the minions.
At least with Jaina, you were fighting Jaina, which is nice, but the first phase there had its own
On
host
her
of problems.
boat.
On the yacht.
Like Gul'dan and the Nighthold, they just removed phase 1. It was gone.
Yeah.
Like phase 1 was awful on Gul'dan as well, and they removed it for Mythic.
Gul'dan,
And-
that was so cool. Like you're fighting him on Mythic for the
actually-
first time, and he just like shatters his thing, and he's like, we're not messing around. This is Mythic time. Like, and that made the fight feel more awesome, right? Because you were just immediately fighting Gul'dan right from the start, and then all of phase 1 happened throughout the phase 2 of Mythic or whatever.
Yeah, these phase 1s are just like, don't lose anybody to battle res due to dumb stuff.
Yeah.
Like a lightning orb, or in Gahoon, oh, I missed the orb, wipe it up. It's like, okay.
Drop the ball. No.
Yeah. So
I ran the wrong direction with the orb. Wipe it up.
What was that? That's a special one.
Just a friend of mine.
Dude, they should make an
Made a
achievement for depositing the orbs on the opposite side that they came from on Cahoon.
Wait, can you do that?
Maybe. I don't know. They should make an achievement for it.
I thought they despawned if you walk down the platform.
Yeah, but maybe you could do it with like a transcendence right at the end or something to the other side. I don't know. It's an idea.
Maybe you have
okay?
like 2 priests lined up, like grip, transcend while you're
Yeah.
midair the whole time.
Keep them midair. Mhm.
Sure.
It would be cool. Or cast flap so you never hit the ground. That's the play.
Good call.
That would be a cool normal achievement.
But back to
I actually
these.
think
Yeah, good.
I actually think it's a shame that so many top end guilds are dying right now too, though.
Yeah, but there are
We're
only
kind-
a
we're
couple
kind of
per
in a
tier,
weird
right?
We've had an uncharacteristically high amount in NA dying within this expansion because we've had like DNO now Encore, right? AK, Wildcard Gaming.
F's in the chat for Wildcard Gaming, yeah.
Instant Dollars died too, right?
Yeah.
It's just like all the top end guilds are just hurting right now, which is weird.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to vodka and limit.
Mm-hmm. And now we've got this classic thing that's going to presumably like kill some of the mid tier guilds too. I'd expect because I don't know, like if you lose like 5 people off your roster to go play classic or whatever, that's a guild killing amount of people to lose if you don't have a solid plan in place for what you're going to do. Let's just quickly cycle back to talking about these phase 1s of end bosses because it is kind of a BFA phenomenon, and in practice for us, for players like in our guilds, it's resulted in these phase 1s that are extremely boring, where there's not like a big thing you're learning. They're very fast to progress, right? You progress through phase 1 in a night or 2 or less. In Azshara's case, it took like an hour to progress phase 1, I think, and then you just have these phases where it's like, okay, you're trying not to burn a B-res, and there's nothing interesting going on, right? So I wonder what the theory behind these was. I wonder if the idea is like, okay, for the guilds that reach Azshara in a month from now, they'll have an interesting phase 1 to progress, and or for the guilds that reach it now and are waiting for big nerfs to it before they kill it, they have something they can progress on until... The thing is that like, it's hard to imagine even like any guild that's capable of killing Zakul not being able to defeat phase 1 of Azshara very quickly.
Instantly.
Yeah. So I don't know what the point is for these, like, and I don't think it makes the fights feel more epic. I like having like this opening prelude. I feel like Gul'dan was a perfect example of a fight that felt more epic because the phase 1 didn't happen.
Honestly, it's just to kill your tank in phase 1 and for him to get upset because you killed the ads unevenly.
Oh yeah, dude. Before they fix that torment thing. Okay, in phase 1,
that may have happened.
And
that may have happened a couple times when he's screaming. He's like, "You just killed the ad. You killed me. What are you doing?"
People that didn't weren't working on Azshara pre-nerf aren't gonna know the pain, but the torment was applied instantly when one of the ads died instead of there being this 3-second grace period, and just tanks would flop. They'd be straight dead.
You had to push in this very tiny window of like one was doing charge spear.
Mm-hmm.
One was doing its tank blast.
Yeah.
And also doing 300% melees or something. Like,
yeah,
it's just so small window, and thank God they fixed it.
Mm-hmm. I cannot believe that one made it to live and lasted more than like the first week of progression. That should have been one of the world first hot fixes.
It's not even hard. It's like stupid.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy and stupid, and like you wipe to it a little bit, and you don't feel like, okay, I wiped to a fun mythic mechanic. You feel like, okay, I've wiped to this game being dumb.
Has been meleeed at the very end because we killed the other ad at the bad time. Like what?
So yeah, I would really love to see a departure from this BFA end boss paradigm of these boring phase ones. Because honestly, like phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 were not that bad on Azshara. They just every single time you'd had to have done this annoying phase 1 first.
Was phase 1 of Argus actually fun? I don't even know how.
It wasn't bad.
Enjoying it, yeah.
It was like it had the mechanics.
The room with the scythes and the pools.
The death cone.
You would get the buff. I guess it was kind of cool because you would actually get those buffs.
You get the Sargeras' Fear and Sargeras' Rage as well, and then you would pick up the Storm or the Water buff, depending on what you were.
I guess it was kind of cool because of the Storm and the Water buff, but then I guess phase 2 was kind of
sense in the fight to me.
It's like, normal as well. Natural. It's normal for phase 1 or for the first phase of a boss fight to be easier than the later phases, right? Like that's we're not arguing that phase 1 should be the hardest phase of the fight. In fact, phase 1 can be significantly easier than the last phase, but it can't be like boring, easy, dumb. Like those are not words that should apply to it.
Yeah, I think there's two things that Gahun and Azshara did that were questionable. It's like, one, you're not fighting the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Argus, you're actually fighting him. And two, it's you have these stop DPS moments at the end of phase 1 where you're waiting for something to happen. With Gahun, you're waiting for this stupid number on your combat timer.
128.
Or else every other mechanic would not line up properly.
Mm-hmm.
And for Azshara, you're waiting for this beam that you can't push. You have to stop DPS. You're forced to do it because beating it is just completely unreasonable. So all these things combined just make it not a great phase, in my opinion.
Yeah. Compared to and there have been some fights where phase 1 has been like where you spend a lot of time progressing. Like Gul'dan was a fight where phase 1 progression, you probably progressed like the amount of pulls per percentage point was probably fastest in phase 1, but it was not that much faster than phase 2. And that, I don't know. What a great fight. I love Gul'dan. Let's get that one back. Okay, let's advance though because we do have other topics to discuss. All in all, I'm pretty happy with Azshara's Eternal Palace. Especially like I think Orgazora, Queen's Court were actually gems of fights in this tier.
I agree.
I would have liked Queen's Court to maybe be a little harder, but at the end of the day, I guess there's not really a good knob for them to turn to make it harder. So
Queen's Court was a really nice example of how something such as area denial can make a fight so much more complex.
Yeah. Because it really area denial, and then it was just strict timings throughout the whole fight. It was just a dance that you learned, and that was really fun actually.
You had to watch out for like the overlaps with like the sparks and stuff like that too. It's a pretty cool fight.
Yeah, so big fan of those fights. Azshara I think will go down as the worst end boss since Xavius.
Do you think it will be actually remembered that poorly?
I think so. Maybe people will argue for Gahun being in there, but I liked Gahun, so I won't.
I mean, you did just kill it last night, so maybe it's a little bit skewed in your memory.
Maybe, but I feel like if you ask like any of the limit or method people, they'll tell you that Azshara was awful.
Yeah, sure. It was awful, but it also doesn't have like a huge pull number to like back it up on like being terrible.
Right? Maybe Kill Jaden will be something that people yell about being worse as well. I like Kill Jaden.
Was remembered poorly because it cost 550 wipes or 700 wipes or whatever the fuck it cost some guilds. Plus the fact that it was actually just not great.
Yeah, I quite liked Kill Jaden, but
that fight was fucking terrible. But my guild was also like not playing that sick either, so I have a very skewed perspective of it all.
Yeah, maybe I'll have and also Azshara suffers from coming right after, like both Azshara and Kill Jaden came right after really good end bosses, right? Like Kill Jaden came after Gul'dan, Azshara came after Unat, and these were fights that I think were pretty well received, pretty universally. Among the like top 100 community or whatever. Okay, let's talk about the MDI. Let's shift away from Raid and talk a little bit about the MDI. So Tettles, you have written on our favorite site Wowhead an article called MDI Rules that would improve class diversity, open parentheses, opinion, close parentheses. Why don't you tell us? Why don't you tell us?
You have to say parentheses.
Look, we have audio only listeners that would benefit from this. Don't complain, or I'll start telling you which letters are capitalized.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Oh Lord.
All right, Tettles. So why don't you introduce our segment here and tell us about this article that you wrote as well?
All right. So basically, it was more of like it was an opinion piece. So basically, there's some people who will end up saying that the MDI should be looking to do more from like a back end to be able to improve class diversity specifically inside of the game, because class diversity is it's a very important thing for the viewership because they want to see their class represented. And basically the the initial point of this article is to talk about some of these rules that could change inside of the MDI specifically that would actually affect class diversity and how they would actually fare. Because for a lot of these rules are pretty bad and will end up making the MDI just like strictly worse for a lot of people, whether it be participants or viewers. I think it would make it just like strictly worse. However, there are some rules that would actually make it more interesting. Engineering gear, Mechagon gear would actually be one of the notable ones that I would say probably should be implemented.
Now, where'd you get these specific rules in your article? Just from talking around the community, or did people ask you to talk about these specific?
So map picks and bans and spec bans, or I would say that I've seen those a lot just around. I don't even know, like Twitch chat,
just from being thrown out by players, right?
Like, yeah,
they had this in MDI.
Being thrown out by players. Like there's also like an MDI Discord that I think we might all be in it. It's like an open Discord. Mm-hmm. There's a specific MDI Discord where people will end up posting feedback and people will talk about some like different stuff. And I think these are things that I've seen in there sometimes where whenever I look at them, I'm like, there are some major logistical issues. So I guess we can start at the top where it says no two of the same spec.
Okay.
Realistically, I actually don't hate the no two of the same spec, but I think it ends up just creating like the same issue where you end up running the same 5. You end up running the same comp every dungeon.
One of the interesting things about this article is that you wrote it like before this most recent cup, and in this most recent cup, I think we saw a lot more diversity among comps.
Yeah,
there were some comps that would have been hit by this rule that were not double rogue, right? Like double unholy in some spots would not have been playable. You'd like any of those maps where some teams played double unholy and other teams played one unholy. Like I think you'd actually have seen less diversity in this cup if there's no two of the same spec rule was implemented. I think almost every dungeon you would just see like Windwalker, Rogue, Unholy, and you wouldn't see teams able to play 2 Rogue or 2 Unholy Mace when the other team wasn't, right? And it's interesting because we're coming off of this time when everybody was playing double or triple Outlaw, but now that we don't have that huge class design problem anymore, I think no two of the same spec actually would reduce balance or would reduce diversity and teams' ability to make a choice now.
I think also part of it is due to the fact that you also have to have melee kicks in every single role.
Yeah.
I'm thinking in my head here. Yeah, it could like potentially push Havoc Demon Hunters into play more if you have the.
It's gonna be melee, right? Everything you think of is gonna be a fucking melee class. Like
everything else is ranged or enhancement shaman or field druid.
Yeah, elemental shaman or yeah. I mean, there are some interesting comp. Like you could play like elemental shaman, Havoc. I guess you still need a rogue though, and they're not benefiting from the Havoc. So yeah, I mean, the Havoc's just so hard to. I mean, there were Havocs though in MDI. There were teams that played a lot of Havocs, right?
Yeah, Trell played triple Havoc,
sure
dude.
Were.
Yeah, so but there were teams that were unironically playing Havoc as well.
Yeah, we actually did play one Havoc in our Toldagor because it just matched up with the Frost Mage Rogue Havoc combo pretty well.
Yeah, that's a season 1 comp as well. It was good. But yeah, I think that no two of the same spec is a short-sighted solution to that. Like when people just see the 3 yellow bars, they're like, okay, we need to fix this. Just make it so that people aren't allowed to do that. But that's not the way. I think
I would agree.
I think Tettles, you've always had this statement that's like it's a class design problem, not a rules problem.
Well, it's also dungeon design too. Like shoehorning everybody into only playing melee is just like a bad thing in general. I feel like the fact that we have 0 range representation like at all, like Mage, Hunter, and Moonkin are all playable. Okay, well Moonkin will never be playable in MDI. Mage and Hunter should technically be playable in an MDI situation. Elemental Shaman could potentially see play at some level in MDI, but the fact that you need like all of these kicks plus like the utility of Elemental Shaman is kind of lacking, plus the fact that it can't be fucking Night Elf. So it's like there's just like a slew of issues with the whole entire design of it where it's like it's a big game issue. So it's hard to fix.
Squishei, how about you? Were any of these rule changes look good to you, or do you have any specific insight as to why some of them would be especially bad?
I mean, I pretty much agree with Tettles. I think that engineering B-Res could at least give the option of running other things. I know that there was like some holy paladins that could that were ran that obviously didn't have meld and don't have B-Res. They had to run on GT or something like that. So that would at least give the option. Will it be ran? I don't know, but if people want to try because they're comfortable in Holy Paladin or they think it's some kind of new meta comp, they're almost encouraged or not as punished for trying.
Yeah. I would say that that's 100% the case because Mistweaver Monk, we actually saw it have some decent play, and Mistweaver Monk is like by far the best healer in Waycrest Manor and Underrot for just like Ring of Peace. Way of the Crane is fucking stupid, and
Disease Dispels in those dungeons is nice as well.
Disease Dispels in those dungeons, yeah exactly.
And they get facilitated by having the DK in the group in the meta for the res.
Right, and that's like the good news is you can just play DK in those dungeons now that you have the outlaw nerfs. But I think being able to play these healers without having to play a DK would be a good thing. And I think Fire Mage being able to play the Hyper Thread wrist wrap so that you could play Fire Mage would be good too.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about having all the Mechagon gear around because like one of the nice things about the MDI right now is that you can inspect the characters and you can see like a list of items that you could realistically get at 445 for your character, like from Mythic Raid or whatever. And if you allow all these like Mechagon items to be scaled up to 445, you'll see everybody running like double Mechagon rings and Mechagon boot or whatever, whatever weird items from Mechagon nobody actually runs on live, except they would because they're slightly better than the other things at 445. So I think not allowing most of the Mechagon gear just so that you have that inspect tool show people something that they could realistically get on live would be good, but I think making an exception for the Hyper Thread wrist wraps so that you could play Fire Mage is a worthwhile like reason to do that.
So I actually don't think we need to talk about map pick ban or spec bans at all.
Yeah,
but I actually really want to talk about 4 spec picks because I started writing it and I am so opposed to it, but I didn't realize why at the beginning. And the more I end up thinking about it, it's because player participation is just so fucking bad right now that if you had to force Sistara and Undead to play an enhancement shaman and like a fury warrior in some map, they would actually just like quit the game. Like those are people that Trell are playing with.
Actually, like, I'm pretty sure Undead would be so happy. Yeah, if he could play enhancement. Yeah,
Dad likes enhanced. Never mind. Yeah. If you force them to play some like really ridiculous shit, like one of them had to play a feral druid and the other one had to play like a sub rogue or something.
Okay, Dad actually likes.
Anyhow, Dad likes playing random shit. Anyways,
my teammates actually like a lot of spec. If you made me play Blood DK, I think I would quit.
Or yeah, exactly. Player participation would actually just like tank because of it if you end up forcing people to play stuff they didn't want to. I feel like is part of the issue too.
Imagine having the healers like play Holy Priest as well. Like
Affliction Warlock.
Oh
Affliction.
No, man.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And honestly, like a lot of MDI players wouldn't mind doing something like that because they can play multiple specs with no problem. The bigger issue though, and connected to what we're talking about, is that things should just be more balanced, so that's not a problem anyway. Like all the Blood DK players I knew from Legion don't really tank anymore because they don't want to play Prot Warrior. It's just people want to play their class.
Yeah,
it would be nice if everything was balanced.
Okay, so Tettles, you were talking a little bit about a participation problem. So what we're talking about here is there are fewer teams every additional cup, and really each season as well. We see this kind of downward slope of participation in the MDI, and we saw a little bit of an uptick with Cup 1 of summer, but now we're going back on this downtrend of how many teams are participating in each MDI. And here, if we look, we can see these are the East Cup time trials for the upcoming East Cup number 2, which is this weekend. That's why we're not recording this weekend, is again, Tettles is going to be casting that live, so we'll be doing that instead this weekend. But you can see here, there's only 7 teams that have actually completed all the time trial dungeons. One of these teams that will be playing in the MDI Cup depleted all 3 of their keys. They have a run over 1 hour. And there's nothing wrong with teams doing that. Like, that is awesome, and teams should be allowed to play, but the problem is that we don't have like this, we don't have a bunch of teams competing for this, right? We have 8 slots to fill and we have 7 teams filling them in. So
even West Cup, there were 8 slots to fill and there were probably 7 teams filling them in.
Yeah, there's like a pretty big gap between the top 7. I mean, there are breakpoints all throughout the West Cup, but there's a pretty big breakpoint between 7th and 8th for sure.
Yeah, and I've actually been talking to Squishei and Trell about this before we even decided this was going to be a topic for the show about MDI participation too, and it's weird because the viewership for like the broadcast is actually not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
However, participation between players is just absolutely terrible, and it's like I feel like it could be detrimental moving forward with the MDI. It's kind of rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely going to make some changes. Like 3 cups per season is a lot. 6 straight weeks of intense practice for at least 4 or 5 days of that week, because you have to spend as much time as you possibly can in the dungeons, or else you're going to lose.
Yeah,
and then not only that, but the way that BlizzCon points are calculated from each cup is kind of punishing for teams wanting to do the second set of cups if they didn't do the first. Like, there's no way you're going to make the BlizzCon. Like, we're currently fighting the 4th place team overall, and they're they're just not hardly even practicing. They're just skating by and probably going to go to BlizzCon even by doing that.
Yeah, because the points, even like they have just so many points built up from season 1. I think that one possible solution to this would be if you let teams be more than 5 people, you could more realistically have it'd be easier to practice if you had 6 or 7 person teams. It'd be a lot easier to first of all, you might see more diversity because you'd have people playing different classes, and you'd bring in people that were good at different classes. And B, you'd be able to do practice runs, where if 5 of your 7 people are around, you can practice in that world. But if 4 of your 5 people are around right now, you can't do that effective practice, right?
That's true.
As weird as it is, I also think it kind of gets stale with there being so many cups. It is turned into less of a fun little tournament and more of an esports thing. And I know Squishei ends up writing a bunch of articles for Wowhead. You told me that the viewership for coverage of the MDI is just atrocious, right?
There's a reason we haven't done many MDI articles recently. It's not a popular subject. I think there's been a lot of cups, and it's just watching, watching a shrine run, for example. The affixes may change, may see slightly different polls, but it's still shrine. It's still the same things with approximately the same comp. That is the same enough that it's kind of just watching the same run over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there should definitely be less cups per season.
Yeah, some way of having less cups, but having them be more impactful. More of a sprint and less of a marathon, I think makes a lot of sense when there are just only the 9 dungeons in play. You just see so much repetition of those same 9 dungeons.
I mean, alternatively, you could only have 4 or 5 dungeons per week.
Yeah, so that way you'd see different things each week, and you'd see that would be good for practice as well. You might encourage more participation because if you only have to practice 5 dungeons each week instead of 9.
Yeah, that'd actually be really good for both sides of the community, the players and the viewers. If you had all 10 dungeons, right? 5 dungeons were in Cup 1, and the other 5 dungeons were in Cup 2. The players only had to practice half the dungeons. That way, they make the dungeons cleaner. The viewers get to see their new polls just once over the weekend, so it's fresh and cool. And then they see the other 5 dungeons the next weekend. That would be pretty good.
I remember when Siege of Borealis first was announced as being a cup and replacing, I believe it was Temple, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So when Siege of Borealis came out, I was excited to see what kind of stuff came out of Siege, and we made a post on it, and some other people were like, "Oh, Siege, that's pretty cool. I wonder if it's gonna be Horde or Alliance or what's gonna happen." And then I don't know whether that actually increased viewership, but some people seemed interested to see something new. So
yeah,
something like that.
And maybe
everyone loves new stuff.
I don't know. Maybe this means they should have a bigger budget for making new dungeons. Maybe if each expansion had 20 dungeons instead of 10, MDI would be better as well.
Well, it's weird because Legion they added Cathedral Eternal Night, both Upper and Lower Karazhan, and See the Triumvirate. Did they add anything else? I think that was it, right?
Yeah, but this expansion we're only going to get Mechagon and maybe 1 in the next patch.
Yeah,
I guess it's 2 Mechagons.
That was something cool about Legion. You're like, oh, we're finally going to see Upper Kara and the MDI this season.
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do? And then they'd do it in 12 minutes or something.
Yeah.
No. They 4GPS it.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
And that was cool to see. Those meta-breaking things are cool the first weekend they happen. The first time you see a new comp, it's cool. And one of the things that I think Blizzard should be less scared of is having things be overpowered for one weekend. If they just if you make bold choices and design changes with the game and things are overpowered for one weekend, I think that's actually more exciting to watch. And then the important thing is just you don't make it 6 months of that meta. Like,
well, yeah, if they balance the game every month, like, dude, if they hit you with a balance patch every month that was like a little bit less incremental, like it was smaller balance patches every month, then we could actually have these things. But dude, I don't want to deal with another 8 months of Outlaw Rogue being like the only class you can bring the keys. Like, what the hell?
yeah, and they did a good thing with that.
The only tank you can play. Like, why is Prot Warrior still the best tank? Like, what the fuck, bro?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Resto Druid. Like, what is happening there?
3 years, bro. 3 years.
Yeah.
I know Tettles brought this up to me, but he said that one of the things that he was, or an idea that I think he was either told, was that like teams were just told what they're playing the day of. No practice.
Oh,
You
dude,
just go,
Nerf mentioned that to me.
Yeah, and Tettles, Nerf, and I were talking about that.
Yeah. I mean, okay. One of the, like, how would you practice under those environments, right? You just do
You
them.
don't. You just do live keys, bro, and you
think
build
you
group
just-
synergy.
Well, I think
You
you
put
still
it
want to
like
do
a-
MDI sized keys probably and practice MDI sized pulls probably for each dungeon, right?
The template, you'd have like a template per dungeon.
Yeah, and you'd
try to make
probably-
a fortified 18 teaming or something, and make it just like an average key without extra affixes, and make like solid pulls out of that, and be prepared for variations. That'd actually be a really cool format.
I think you'd practice like you'd practice a route for each dungeon, and you'd at least think about what you were going to do on bolstering, and then other affixes that change route from that, and like you'd think about a comp for it. I don't know. It's an interesting idea as well, though. The thing is, though, you'd see like scuffed gameplay, right? Like you'd see more. I guess you'd probably see smaller pulls, and you'd see them succeed more often. I guess because people wouldn't try these huge pulls, would they?
As long as the players are okay with it, I don't really care, because right now, viewership is viewership seems fine, but like the player participation seems like it will end up causing an issue in the long term for the health of the MDI. Like if people just do not want to participate, then it will actually just be innately just terrible.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to our third and final topic of the day. Live keys, which you were just talking about, doing those as preparation for MDI. But of course, live keys are a different phenomenon than the MDI. One thing that we have just learned is the affix rotation. I believe we have the full one now, maybe, if nothing has changed from PTR. Like, this was the last week that we hadn't seen on PTR. Started now, right?
This was the bolstering explosive was the first week on the PTR when Beguiling went live.
Okay, so
if it follows the same as the PTR, this will be the rotation.
Right, so here we are on bolstering explosive tides, and then once we get back to what is it? Bolstering Grievous Fortified? Is that the first one that we had this patch? Yeah. So we have kind of 4 more question mark-ish weeks, but they're less question marks than the others have been. And we think we know the whole schedule now for Beguiling keys. Now, a lot of these weeks are pretty rough, huh? These are, like, okay, first off, anything that says Void under Beguiling type, which, by the way...
Strike through.
Wherever this table came from, they've got Beguiling, like how Moofs pronounces it, in the table there.
It actually is Beguiling.
Beguiling.
Moofs was right all
Moofs,
along.
yeah, he knew it. But yeah,
Might have been a typo.
Yeah, I think this is probably just a Moofs table. Okay, so yeah, any of there are some hard Beguiling weeks, and then there are some hard non-Beguiling weeks as well, right? Like we're looking at Bursting Necrotic Enchanted, Tyrannical is another week that's just hard. There's a lot of tough weeks here that are not the Void weeks as well. All in all, I think it's a pretty hard calendar. It's pretty hard to push this season. I think mostly just because Beguiling is like an extra affix relative to Reaping in terms of like the number of affixes that will cause you to be slower and wipe more often. So yeah, live keys this season.
I just noticed 3 of the enchanted weeks are with bursting.
I was just looking at that too.
Oh yeah, that's bizarre. I guess those kind of patterns just
Yeah.
are guaranteed to happen if you're like it's kind of hard to just
Probably
randomize
something,
these
yeah.
things and stop that from happening. And like if it wasn't that, it would be like, okay, 3 of the tide weeks are skittish or whatever. But
I prefer
would like
bursting
that.
with enchanted, not with void. So thank you.
yes, yeah,
Very true. Yeah. Maybe
That's
that
probably,
was
that's probably
intentional.
part of the reason that they did it is because bursting literally just cannot be with void because
I don't know.
Did they actually put bursting with void at all?
There's quaking's worse.
Yeah, we have void quaking, we have void grievous, and we have void necrotic. Like all of those are annoying void weeks. The only void week that isn't affected by one of those is teeming volcanic void, which is teeming void. So that's also
what happens
hard.
when Tettles stands in a volcanic?
True.
I mean, Krakatoa, bro.
I don't... Okay, yeah.
Just heal me.
But I guess
one heal.
The question we're trying to answer here is what makes live keys hard. So, Trell, what makes live keys hard?
Honestly, this season and from the pushing I've done so far, it's pretty much if it's a void week, it's a hard week. Otherwise, it's doable and there's ways to play around it. There's still a lot of challenges you have to work through and figure out how to deal with all the beguiling situations, like how to pull this pack without aggroing the tides at all, or how to keep the tides out for this entire pull without straightening your healer too much so they can also heal, or who's going to take care of the enchanted in this pull while all these intense mechanics are going on with 4 kicks required and stuns and whatnot. So it's definitely like a hard season overall, and the void weeks just make it exponentially harder.
Especially because we're all playing Horde, right? And we don't have access to Shadow Meld, which I imagine the Alliance has just got a different experience with void weeks than we do. If they're like teams that are pushing with 5 Night Elves are just having a different life than we are.
There's a team that's pushing with 4 Night Elves and a prop paladin, and they literally just skip every void. And it's like
it's a whole different world for Night Elf players. It's crazy how different it is.
Mm-hmm.
You just think about all the ridiculous void packs, like the one right in front of Volcall, the famous one. You just skip it. The boss is definitely going to be 2 minutes long, and that's the CD of Shadow Meld. So you Shadow Meld in and you Shadow Meld out. Easy.
Well, okay, so it's not only just the Void Emissary itself, but it's also pathing and strategy around beguiling. So it's actually nice that Tides Emissaries actually end up giving 4 count, because it makes count so loose in a bunch of dungeons. However, you can't path around Void Emissary in pretty much every dungeon except for Freehold and Natalzar. It's like pretty much not pathable around. You have to actually fight them at these like choke points, and even at Taldazar, they put that shit Void in that Volcall pack because I don't know. They put Void Emissaries at choke points because they don't want you skipping them at all.
Yeah, there's the fun one as well. Just that like this week in Atal, that's just like at the top of the stairs to Alunza, and it's just like, okay, here's a void that's not next to anything. And they have them in these weird places. Like King's Rest has them some weeks as well, where there's just like a random void after the gauntlet, and you're just like, okay, there's not. It's just like, okay,
after the Zool gauntlet, it's just like, what the fuck?
It's just
like,
like,
why is that even there?
It's time to fight a void emissary now. Like,
no, you don't fight that one at King's Rest. You literally
my favorite is King's Rest. At the
end.
Just walk right by it, LOS, and fight the boss.
There's the one that shows up some weeks after the first gauntlet, after the first room.
Yeah,
and that one you're just like, time to fight a void now, or pull back the construct onto it. Yeah.
We had the Temple of Sethralis Dervish one this week on Tides. Mm-hmm. It's literally on the stairs in the double Dervish pack, and you're just like, dude, how do you expect us to live through that pull? Like,
and these void emissaries are not
like LOS it.
They're not as bad in an MDI setting, right? Because in MDI you're either melding them or it's a 17, and you're able to nuke it down pretty effectively, and you can it's just not that. It's not nothing else is as lethal. But in these live keys, like, the void damage doesn't scale, but everything else is harder. Everybody is lower on health. You're much more likely to die to taking void hits. And the void is living for a lot longer. So, that's a big factor for making live keys hard.
This is an interjection on that, but I just wish Blizzard would have designed it but the opposite philosophy. Like, put a void emissary next to the good packs that people are going to want to pull to encourage them to maybe go somewhere else or continue doing their normal route. Just add in the big island instead of putting it at every choke point and hardest pack in the game that people have to skip to survive.
Well, because when they designed it and when they placed them, they weren't giving count, right? They only gave count late in the process, right? So I think they were originally like, if we put these in out of the way packs, people aren't going to engage with this affix.
They did some real math as to like how to make sure that you couldn't shroud past it and stuff. They're like,
well,
all right, this was cool if they tried to get past.
Yeah, they forgot about distract, but they fixed that a couple weeks in. Yeah.
So what do you guys think about optimal comps versus like shit comps for pushing? Because that can actually make some keys really rough, especially on roles that are very important. I know Dratnos loves to run the Restoration Shaman, Protection Paladin comp.
Yeah, often no rogue as well, and those, you know, it's fun. It's fun to do those keys, but you certainly feel like, you know, the comp is a huge factor in why, you know, you're having to, like, you have to do so much more work on a lot of pulls, and there are a lot of pulls where you're just like, okay, you know, we can do this because it's a 17, but we couldn't do this in a 20.
I think it's a lot worse comp wise. Like if you don't have a Wrestler Druid for some of the worst Tides packs, that thing is coming. That thing is coming with the pack, and you have to find a way to deal with it and survive a Shadow Bolt volley or
if you don't have a ROP, like I've only played with Brewmaster Monk this season. I've literally only played with Squishei, Trell, and Trance, and all three of them play Brewmaster Monk. So we always have Ring of Peace. But like if you didn't have a ring, like how would you deal with some of those packs?
Yeah, it's hard. Like Tides, Defiler before the third boss and Underrot. That's a pack that I've wiped to many times on many different weeks when there's a Tide in there. Because 2 of the 3 weeks there's a Tides in that pack for some reason.
Yeah.
And like there are options to deal with it, but you have to, like, if you don't have the Mage, the Druid, the Ring of Peace, it's like it's way harder than if you do have one of those things.
And those
just, like.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. It's basically just like single target on a void. If you go high key level, that thing starts to get 3 million, 3.5 million, 4 million health, and most of them are not in a spot that you can line of sight, which kind of defeats the purpose of the ability. But what are you gonna do? You just have to kill it. There's
also fake walls everywhere too.
Yeah, like Motherload after the first boss. It's like, yeah, this big pillar, that's not line of sight, you know. And my favorite is Goblin line of sight spots. Like, there's this void in Underrot where a Goblin can line behind this half pillar and nobody else can. I'm sure gnomes and stuff can too. But I was just like, yeah, guys, it's safe. You know, come stand on X. It's line spot. And all 5 of us stood there and 4 of them died, and I was there living. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. You can just jump and lava burst and then jump back down, and you're in line again.
I was doing a freehold last night, and there's this void that's next to like the Ludwig pack that's in like it's near like the Brine Scale Patrol pack with all the yellow mobs and whatever else. You know where that crusher, like the opening gate to where the arena is? That's actually not line. That's like fake. Those rocks are like fake. They're just like, what? Like, how is that even a fake wall? So much shit, dude.
They have all that. I mean, the mechanic for Void Emissaries is you clearly need to LOS to survive. That's what's intended from Blizzard, and they have them in all these spots where you can't do it. It just blows my mind.
The Void Emissary itself just seems very contradictory. Like Trell said, the ability says line of sight in its like to all enemies in line of sight, which means that it seems like the ability is meant to be line of sighted. But then Blizzard put these Void Emissaries in the packs which people skip because they want them to not skip them anymore, which are usually the hardest packs, and didn't care about where they are or if there's line of sight or anything like that. Like, I think line of sighting as an ability was good, but where they put them was really bad, and it needed to be one or the other.
Yeah, maybe
just like give us a little temporary season 3 pillar, you know, like right in the middle of a Taldazar, so you can.
Put a pillar right next to the fucking Void Emissary.
I mean,
something.
Alternatively, it's called like hide. What if like it started charging up, and a couple seconds before it detonated, it put like 2 safe zones in the area that you have to like try to scramble into, and you hide in these little safe zones and like that would have made a little more sense. But this is the way we got it, so.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, that would have been fun. Like little, you know, safe spots like that. Grim Batol last boss, you know, in Cataclysm, that 5-person dungeon. Yeah, where it would just like put a little eye down and you had to quickly get in there. There were just a couple of those that showed up right at the end.
Or they dropped like a smoke bomb like next to it or something. That
was cool. Or maybe this is space for like, you know how there is this void in using the word, you know, lowercase v void in terms of like other classes having abilities on par with Shroud's level. Like maybe like, okay, what if Frostmage could just make a wall that was line of sight? Like, you know, a frost wall that lasted for 5 seconds that was line of sight. Like what if that was the kind of like per dungeon or, you know, Shroud size utility that they could do sometimes, like once every 6 minutes, and you could just like have,
it would only be available to Druid, Monk, or Rogue because that's those are the classes that need utility buttons, bro.
And that the sick part is like Smoke Bomb from Conflict and Strife would have been absolutely used in keys. Yeah, you'd feel like, okay, yeah, well, you know, we bomb the second void every time, and it's good.
Bomb me, bro.
Yeah.
I'm moving in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, one thing, Squishei, as well, that you're a bit of an expert on is the scaling of these dungeons, right? This is something that you've done some of the research into.
Yes.
And this season we've had this kick up a notch compared to previous seasons. What are your thoughts on dungeon scaling?
I think it's gonna get really, really bad. Maybe not this in 8.2, but in the next season, I think we kind of talked about it earlier that health pools aren't increasing at the rate that damage is, which means you might start seeing the Herja one-shots or the Blackrook Hold one-shots or other one-shots.
Shade of Xavier is unhealable, dude. No.
I mean, we're already there in MDI level keys. Even in 18s, like the Raging Motherload that people did this weekend, instant one-shots. Anytime the grease, what are they called? Grease guns from the mech jockeys were enraged, 100%.
My favorite part about that is you can stun them and they'll still cast their grease guns. They'll just be there. They'll be there stunned, and you'll see them stunned, and just they won't do the animation of shooting, but you'll see while they cast the grease gun, the gun will appear in their hand, and then it'll disappear from their hand when the grease gun damage happens, and they're stunned, teleporting a gun to their hand.
This has been tilted by this once. Who hurt you?
A mech jockey, repeatedly. I think this is a really good point though. Is that we have this expansion where at the start of the expansion, everybody's damage and health was pretty tame, and damage has just been ramping really hard, but health and defensives have not, except for tanks, they've been scaling a little bit because tanks, scale health and defensive values, but pretty much everybody else, we've gained a bunch of damaging, we've gained extra damaging Azurite, we've gained extra damaging essences, we've gained all these, raid power level stuff across our gear, but we haven't really gained anything in the way of defensives. So we're able to do more damage to keys, right? We're doing these higher level keys we're doing more damage, but our health pools being lower relative mean that we're just much more susceptible to these one shots and to.
How is it not an issue for tanks though? How has it not been an issue for tanks?
To some extent,
either of you guys know?
To some extent it is, but tank essences do scale their defensives, right? Tank Azurite, getting 6 Azurite traits for tanks is a defensive increase, right? Because you pick defensive Azurites, or you can at least, right? But the new patch systems increase DPS players' damage only, basically.
It's a huge verse gain too. All the essences for tanks give a ton of verse if you do the right ones. The Composite Strife is permanent 400 verse. The Aegis is 600 verse and mini pull. So flat going from season 2 to season 3, you get a flat 1,000 verse in some pulls basically. And then on top of that, the 2 trinkets from the new raid are good. The 2 healing trinkets, so that's a big survival gain. Just little things like that. It's helping tanks, but I don't think DPS are getting a survivability bonus like tanks are.
So do you think they should increase health pools? Is that the issue for DPS?
No. I think they have 2 scaling factors. When you insert a key, they have a health bubble and a damage bubble.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't just separate them. If DPS is getting so much that they needed to increase the scaling of the health, just increase the damage by slightly less.
Yeah.
I don't think you needed the same amount of damage increase as a health increase on keys this season.
And I think Diablo does a good thing of this, right? Because Diablo 3 has a similar problem where players' damage scales a lot faster than their defensives, and so in the Greater Rifts, their Mythic Plus equivalent, health scales a lot faster than damage from the mobs to match the fact that you're able to deal with more of their health than you are of their damage, right? And the alternative kind of forces people to play these a very few specs that can survive one shots, like Rogue, with Cheat Death and Cloak and Vanish and whatever. So you could just we'd get to this Legion thing where if you just keep scaling damage as aggressively as they are from the mobs, then that's going to be the world we live in. It's going to be one shot meta again. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm unkillable class, so we're good to go.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any final thoughts here on live keys? Going once?
I think the biggest thing is I think it's just prep. I think the biggest thing is just preparation with having to know exactly which emissaries you can pull out without pulling the pack, which ones you see who's handling it. You have to just go into this dungeon set with, I'm going to handle this emissary this way, you're going to handle this emissary this way, and that's just a lot of extra work that we didn't have to do with reaping.
Well, that's the way it always is, right? The barrier to entry for Mythic Plus in general is just preparation and knowledge of what you can and can't pull, meta strategies, what to be shrouding, it's just a bunch of shit. It's hard to jump into for that reason too. It's similar to PvP in the sense of PvP has just a bunch of old relics of the past, mechanics that work in certain ways that nobody would know unless they PvP'd for prolonged periods of time. Mythic Plus is similar in a completely different way. It's just if you don't know what you should be looking to shroud, then there's no chance that you're going to know without running with like a good group.
Right, but I think Squishei's saying that like beguiling in particular, you need to have like everybody on the same plan for each emissary. Unlike reaping keys, you could kind of just like each time you did a pull, each person could do things that they knew were good against that pull, and it would be fine. But with reaping, like everybody needs to know, all right, we're focusing this void, or we're lining this void, we're rooting this tide, or we're focusing this tide, we're ringing it or whatever. Like you need to know what you're doing with each emissary, and everybody needs to be on that same page before you start each pull. You can't kind of just like figure it out mid pull. You can't kind of realize that like, okay, I should kick this, and I've done this dungeon before, I know I should kick this.
It's like
so what you're telling me, is that I can't pull the first 2 packs in front of the first boss of Borealis and the boss on Sanguine.
Probably not.
I tried that, and it was not what we were looking for.
Oh no!
I hit a fat anima, and I was living, but the rest of my group very quickly perished.
Yeah, I think this is a seasonal affix that much more than reaping, maybe on the same level as infested. You kind of need to have done the dungeon this week with that group before you can time it at a high key level, and just have talked about everything. Yeah.
Just to give an example, like Tettles and I did a freehold, and the double Ravager pack, right in front of Harlan, there's a tides there this week, and before you have to have like when you do that without a tides, you get like 4 or 5 CCs, and then you get the double Ravager down like pretty easily. Especially this week with bolstering, you have to rob the tides out, CC that out of the way, get all your CCs, and then do double Ravage correctly, or else you bolster them and you're dead in the water. So it's just like beguiling just complicates so many things and adds like 1 or 2 extra steps that you have to do every time that your group has to be ready for.
Yeah, it's obnoxious.
All right, let's move on to questions and answers. We have some from our Discord and some from our Twitter. Our first one comes on Discord from our patron Nevernude, who asks, what are the good and bad changes for MDI since its inception? So since the beginning of MDI, and Tettles, as an MDI caster and competitor, I think you're kind of a good historian for this. What do you think about the different changes that the MDI has gone through since its inception, and what are some of them?
So one of them, I would say, is the fact that they actually allow you to play whatever class or you want or spec you want in between every single game. I think that was a big one. For a while, you were actually locked into like they had like a class pool system, and then you were locked in the same comp for all 3 dungeons of that pool. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that you're actually able to swap comps in between every single match is a pretty big deal. That's one of the better changes by far.
Yeah, I think moving away from the map pick system has been good too, because those were that led to this kind of like everybody practiced the first map and then their pick, and there was a lot of like non-games in those 2 and 3 games in MDI before.
And it was still a best of 3 back then, but people would be given a first map for sure way before the cup, and they'd practice the crap out of that map to be sure that they would win the map, so then they would be able to pick the next map.
Yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, and
so that way you had 2 maps that you for sure were going to do as long as you won the first, and that you were extremely prepared for. And if you lost it, you pretty much lost the best of 3 because you wouldn't know what the second map was.
Yeah, I'm so much more happy with the way it is right now. We actually see a lot more 2-0s. And we're actually seeing like the better teams like winning as opposed to like these 2-1s where you just like rock, paper, scissors the first match. It was really dumb.
So I think that was a good change as well. Squishei, how about you? Do you have anything you've identified as being a good change for the MDI since it started?
I mean, along the same line, maps just now have preset affixes for the week. So you only have to practice the dungeon with this affix instead of, back then, I think the winner got to choose the affix. Is that right?
The loser got to choose the affix. That was awful.
Okay. Yeah, and then you had
they would always Dr. J always pick explosive, bro.
Yep.
Like stop.
So just knowing what you're getting into, so you can practice that instead of having, what's the loser? What kind of affix are they going to choose? Or we have to deal with Grievous or Sanguine or Explosive, and yeah.
It was like bursting. You could only pick between certain ones. It was like quaking, bursting, skittish, or explosive. And basically, if you never practiced the dungeon with explosive or bursting, you had absolutely no idea how to deal with it.
All right. Next question comes from @SaneTweet, who asks, Any advice on how to handle on-death affixes and pugs? Any bolstering, sanguine, or bursting week becomes a pure nightmare pretty quick. My perspective on this is like, if you're in a group that you can't easily coordinate, first off, just don't do the hardest pulls with those affixes. Like, if you're the tank or whatever in these pugs, just pull slower, pull like, one pack at a time, and pull, so that you're not in a position where you can bolster something out of control. Don't rely on your group to do priority damage. At a couple spots in each dungeon, you're going to kind of be forced to do that, and if you need to, you just kill half the mobs, die, and kill it again, I guess. I don't know. If you're trying to pug at a level where you're not going to be able to beat the timer by doing those kind of strategies, then you need to play with an amount of coordination where you can actually play the affix, and bolster kill stuff.
I think a big thing is people will see the well-practiced teams pull off these crazy bolstering pulls or bursting pulls and be like, I could never do that in a pug. And I think one thing that people need to be sure of doing in pugs is just to take an extra step of safety, like move the pack farther back away from the other mobs that would potentially bolster it than you think is necessary, or CC one mob in this big bursting pull to show your group that you're going to need to separate the bursting stacks, remind them, this is the affix, so you actually have to be concerned about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd also help if you actually get the mobs grouped up a little bit tighter. I think it's a pretty big deal to actually, if your mobs are like spread too far, a lot of classes actually can't get very good cleave, and of course we'll end up either, for bursting's case, we'll end up making it a little bit easier, but in stuff like bolstering or sanguine, it could actually just be pretty rough. I know sanguine specifically, you also want to kill back to front if you're kiting a pack.
Yeah,
meaning that like the very tail end of that pack that you're kiting should be killed first, as opposed to like the front mob, so they don't walk all the way through your sanguine.
All right, next question comes from @Kovrob13, who asks, with the new season's affix schedule, or affix shuffle rather, do you think they managed to bring the weeks closer in terms of difficulty? So again, that schedule we think is, not this one, it's this one. I think the answer to this is yes. I think that there's like a lot. Last season there were like 2 clear great weeks, right? There was like Fortified, Bolstering, Skittish was the good Fortified week, and there was like Tyrannical, Raging Volcanic or whatever was the good Tyrannical week. And there were like a couple of there were 2 like medium weeks for Tyrannical and Fortified, and then there were like a bunch of bad ones. And now they're just all bad. So they're closer in terms of difficulty.
All right, well, very well put.
That's kind of what I was thinking. It's like they brought the top end down, I think, because they took away the best weeks, but they also kind of brought the bottom end even worse down because of Void or stuff like Teeming, Quaking, Fortified Tides. Like, Terrell, I asked you about this earlier. That week doesn't sound fun as a tank, does it?
No, it doesn't. That'd be pretty rough. I think it's reasonable. Like, if thinking about it, it's probably okay next to other weeks, but it just takes so much preparation, like we talked about.
Mm-hmm. I think that like the weeks will be closer, and I think like one of the good things is that like I think the push weeks were worse than this. I think it's better to have all the weeks be bad than most of them be bad and a couple be good, because I think it does suck to feel like you aren't effective. Like, and the nice thing about this is pretty much every week you can feel like you can actually like push keys relative to the other weeks, and so I think it's good even though they're all harder. But yeah, it's there's not easy weeks anymore.
Yeah.
With them bringing in the MDI fan favorite of Bursting Necrotic, I mean, how can you go wrong?
Yeah.
That is by far the best affix combo of all time.
How did that one make it through? Like, I feel like there should be a proofreader of these affixes that just show them the 2 affixes and are like, are these a rough, like, is this combo unfair? Like, they just need to ask that question before they make these.
No, they do. I mean, they go to a therapist, they do the blotch test, and they're like, which 2 affixes did you see here? And they're like, Bursting Necrotic, and they're like, okay.
Yeah, they just had some very disturbed person come up with that affix on their Rorschach test or whatever. Yeah. Okay, next question comes from Kappa DH through our Discord. Considering what happened to now in Method EU versus Abra, do you think there should be a pause sort of mechanism in MDI just to prevent unfortunate situations like these? Yes, there should be, but there will not be. So it's one of these things where just the game, like, the amount of coding that it would take for them to put a pause in WoW, like given all the stuff that all the code that they're building off of, it would be that would be a huge endeavor for Blizzard. They're not going to do that, I don't think. But yeah, it would be good. I think that given that they're not going to create a pause mechanism, I think that the system, the rules as they have it now, are the best of a couple bad options. Because I think that like remaking, for instance, after something like that is not something that you can do after somebody DCs on their end.
Somebody threw up the alternative rule of if the team is ahead, like significantly ahead, and somebody DCs, or you end up having some like questionable stuff happen, like your Skystreamer disengages out of the arena, then there should be a chance for you to remake. But at the end of the day, I think I agree with you. I think the rules out as they currently stand are the best.
Yeah. I like,
and even Zorbrix himself, he's one of the main MDI admins. He's asked Blizzard for a pause feature for the MDI several times, he said, and they're just not able to do it. It's just not in the game engine to do at the moment. So
yeah, we'd be talking about like a huge investment of resources apparently to create a pause feature. So it's not. Yeah.
The pause button comes whenever World of Warcraft 2 comes. Like,
yeah,
new game engine.
Which, you know, I'll play that if it has Mythic Plus for sure.
I'm about it, yeah.
Unless it has Resto Druids. If there are Resto Druids in that game, I'm out of there. Count me out. I've had enough. All right. One final question we got here from Arrow on Discord, and then we'll close out our show. Do you think a Shadow Meld nerf would help fix the lack of faction diversity in the MDI? If so, what would be an appropriate nerf to the ability? Let's just do a lightning round, because I think all of us have the same answer here, which is yes. Let's just answer with what we think Shadow Meld should be. Squishy, you can go first. What would you nerf Shadow Meld to?
I honestly have no idea.
Okay, all right. I'll go first. We'll get to you last, but
yeah, put me on the spot there.
My nerf is give it a 30-minute cooldown. 30-minute cooldown Shadow Meld. Tettles, what's your nerf Shadow Meld?
You can't drop combat, but you're still able to gimmick abilities like drains and other abilities that are targeting you, but it shouldn't drop combat. Okay.
Trell.
I think it should be straight up banned until they fix it. I think it's like lots of MOBAs and esports like Dota 2, they ban classes until they figure out how to balance them. Like they straight up just make them unavailable for competitive play. And Shadow Meld is clearly like way too good for every affix, in my opinion. So I think it should just be X'd until they find a solution.
Yeah.
You have Dwarf, and then you also have Arcane Torrent, which are both good racials.
Yeah.
They are good racials.
Human was used this MDI too.
Human was used this week because people were using Every Man for themselves because it breaks stuns. So people were getting stunned by the lashers.
Yeah.
Because they were pulling it with the tides, and they were human racialing it. It was like
that was actually a really good play. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, and having the racial diversity, like the main problem is just Shadow Meld is so OP that it's also affecting class balance too, right? You can't like whether or not a class can be a Night Elf is probably the biggest thing for whether or not you can play a class. Like if Resto Druid could not be Night Elf and Mistweaver could, I think you would see mostly Mistweavers. And that, yeah.
All right, I have an answer.
Okay.
Just a threat drop. Just drops your threat to 0, just like Soul Shatter used to be.
Okay.
Just removes all threat.
Cool.
I can see that.
Yeah. Night Elf tanks now have a questionable button on their on their racial active.
I actually hit that sometimes by accident because I'm used to pressing my Blood Elf racial on live, and I'm like, oh, you guys are dead.
Does your whole group like instantly die?
Oh yeah, they all instantly.
Yeah.
See, nothing's gonna change.
Love it.
It's great.
Love it. All right, that's gonna be all.
It's not used, but yeah.
That is going to be all for us this week, though. We'll be back next week for more Titanforge podcast. Again, we're still going to be not live for the next 2 more episodes after this, and then we'll try and go back to live recordings. But thanks so much for being on our show, Squishy. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. It was great.
And
I had a lot of fun.
Tettles, Trell, and I will return next week. For now, goodbye.
Goodbye.